The bombings stopped Friday night. After 13 consecutive nights of U.S. airstrikes on Iran and 13 nights of Iranian retaliations against U.S. military bases across the Gulf, both sides held their fire over the weekend. The reason may matter more than the pause itself. At a White House meeting on Friday, Joint Chiefs Chairman General Dan Caine raised concerns about the United States munitions stockpile. The U.S. military's top uniformed officer was telling the president, as the president was weighing further escalation, that the weapons supply is a constraint. Trump's UN envoy, Mike Waltz, said Sunday that the president is giving talks some space, and also that the military remains locked and loaded. The deputy foreign ministers of Iran and Oman held talks about the Strait of Hormuz over the weekend. Netanyahu visits the White House on Tuesday. The human cost as of the last confirmed figures, 59 Iranians killed and 666 injured since June 27th, per Iran's own health ministry. 4 U.S. service members killed in the most recent Iranian strikes, per the Pentagon. Separately, France and Spain are fighting wildfires described as monstrous in scale today, with more heat coming. And Israel sent an earthquake relief team to Venezuela for 3 weeks. They've now returned home, and Venezuela's acting president, whose government is effectively controlled by the United States Secretary of State, thanked them. Let's take all 3. Start with the pause, because the reason for it is the most revealing detail of the entire 5-month conflict. On Friday night, U.S. Central Command did not post its now routine X update announcing strikes on Iran. For 13 consecutive nights, CENTCOM had publicly acknowledged each round of strikes. The silence on Friday was the announcement. A Department of Defense source told CNN on Saturday that operations were on a hold. Iran simultaneously said it had halted its own retaliatory attacks against U.S. allies in the region. After nearly 2 weeks of consecutive mutual strikes, the U.S. hitting Iranian air defense systems, radar sites, bridges, transport infrastructure, coastal positions, Iran hitting U.S. military bases in Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, and Jordan. Both sides stopped at roughly the same time. The diplomatic framing came from Mike Waltz, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, speaking on 2 programs Sunday morning. Waltz said, "What the president is doing right now, as we've seen all along, is giving some talks some space. Talks are ongoing. They're happening at every level, from the more technical aspect of it all the way to the highest levels." On Fox News Sunday, he said, "Diplomatic efforts have ramped up, particularly in the past few days." Both statements came alongside a simultaneous reiteration that the U.S. military is locked and loaded, and that Trump is keeping all options on the table. The combination of giving talks space and locked and loaded is the standard formulation this administration has used throughout the conflict, simultaneously signaling openness and readiness, which functions politically for both domestic audiences and for Iran. The reason I said the reason for the pause matters more than the pause is this. CNN reported that at a White House meeting on Friday, the same day the bombing stopped, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs General Dan Caine raised concerns about the U.S. munitions stockpile. NAMPA's ticker for July 27 confirmed the Xinhua AFP version of the same story. U.S. fails to defend against some Iranian missiles due to ammunition shortage. These are 2 separate pieces of confirmation pointing at the same underlying military reality. The U.S. military's top officer raised the ammunition supply as a concern when the president was considering escalation. U.S. air defense systems failed to intercept some Iranian missiles because of ammunition constraints. The bombing stopped the same night those concerns were raised. If the pause is primarily about giving talks space, it represents a genuine diplomatic opening. If it is primarily driven by the munitions ceiling, by the fact that sustained high-tempo strike operations are depleting the U.S. military's missile and precision munitions stockpile faster than it can be replenished, then the pause is not a diplomatic choice. It is a logistical necessity dressed in diplomatic language. Both things can be true simultaneously. They are not mutually exclusive. The ammunition concern doesn't prevent the administration from using a pause for genuine diplomatic purposes, but it changes what the pause means strategically. And it raises a question that hasn't been asked loudly enough. If the U.S. military is burning through munitions at a rate that concerns its own chairman of the Joint Chiefs after 13 nights of operations, what does an extended campaign, or the massive joint military campaign that was described as one of two options on the table, actually look like for American military readiness more broadly? The diplomatic track has genuinely accelerated over the weekend. The deputy foreign ministers of Iran and Oman held talks in Tehran about the Strait of Hormuz, confirmed by Iran's own foreign ministry in a telegram post Sunday. Oman's role is significant. It has co-managed the strait and has a decades-long tradition of quiet mediation between the U.S. and Iran. Technical-level talks about the strait specifically suggest there is a working-level negotiation about what a Hormuz governance arrangement might look like, even as the two governments' public positions on that arrangement, Iran wanting fees and formal control, the U.S. and Oman opposing both, remain apart. Netanyahu visiting the White House on Tuesday adds a further dimension. CNN confirmed the visit at Trump's announcement during the White House Correspondents' Dinner Friday. Netanyahu's office released its own confirmation. Israel participated in the February 28 strikes that started the war. Israel has consistently pressed for a more maximalist position toward Iran. Trump meeting with Netanyahu on Tuesday, during what may be a diplomatic pause, will test whether the U.S.-Israel position remains unified on the terms of any deal, and whether Israel's preferred outcome, which has never included a nuclear-capable Iran under any circumstances, is compatible with the terms Iran's negotiators are apparently working toward in Oman. The human cost, stated plainly, Iran's own health ministry confirmed 59 people killed and 666 injured in Iran since June 27th. That figure, from Hossein Kermanpour, is the Iranian government's official count of its own civilian casualties. It does not include military personnel. 4 U.S. service members were killed in the most recent wave of Iranian strikes, per the Pentagon's confirmed figures. Defense Secretary Hegseth testified before Congress that the war has cost $37.5 billion so far, though experts told CNN the actual figure is higher. A Trump Truth Social post from last week compared the Iran military conflict, his chosen term, not Iran war, to historical U.S. military engagements. At 4 months and 18 confirmed U.S. deaths, he positioned it as historically brief. The 59 Iranian civilians killed and 666 injured are not in that post. Now Europe, because what is described as a monster wildfire emergency in France and Spain today is the third major climate emergency in these two countries since May. AFP's Bordeaux Dispatch, confirmed today in the Nampa news ticker for July 27th, described France and Spain battling wildfires of monster scale with more heat on the way. I want to hold that phrase, monster, and situate it in what has already happened this summer, because it is not an outlier. It is the third wave. The first wave, a European heat wave in late May, killed 11 people across 5 countries and broke temperature records from Ireland to Spain. The second wave, a more severe heat wave in late June and early July, killed over 1,300 people in excess deaths across Europe, with France alone accounting for roughly 1,000 of those. Paris approached temperatures above 40 degrees Celsius for the first time in recorded June history. Corsica and parts of southern France saw fires then too. The European health infrastructure, the WHO's Director General confirmed, was not built for these temperatures. Now, the third event. Wildfires in France and Spain simultaneously, described as monster scale, with more heat forecast. The specific geography of today's fires matters. Bordeaux, where the AFP dispatch originates, is a wine-producing region in southwestern France, whose agricultural and economic identity is inseparable from a specific climate. The vine variety, the soil chemistry, the drainage patterns, the harvesting windows, all calibrated to temperatures that are now being exceeded routinely. This is not a coincidence or an isolated weather event. The Copernicus Climate Change Service confirmed earlier this month that June temperatures in Western Europe were nearly 5.5 degrees Celsius above average. Scientific attribution analysis published throughout the summer confirmed that events of the type and frequency now being observed would have been virtually impossible without human-caused climate change. France and Spain combined represent two of Europe's most climate-exposed major economies. They are also, notably, the two countries whose national football teams just played the World Cup final, a detail that captures something real about how simultaneously ordinary and catastrophic the current moment is. The same countries that hosted the greatest sporting spectacle of the year are today fighting monster wildfires under a forecast of incoming heat. Both things are happening. The spectacle gets the broadcast hours, the fires get an AFP ticker line, more heat is on the way. And now a story that's genuinely unlike anything else I've covered this month, because it involves an Israeli earthquake relief team in Venezuela and the specific geopolitical geometry it creates. The Times of Israel live blog from July 22 confirmed the following. An Israeli delegation, comprising IDF officers and foreign ministry officials, traveled to earthquake-stricken Venezuela following the June 24th twin earthquakes and stayed for approximately 3 weeks. Venezuela's acting president Delcy Rodriguez had invited the delegation to extend its stay and had approved a national reconstruction plan that the Israeli team prepared jointly with Venezuelan authorities. When the delegation's field mission concluded, Rodriguez met with the IDF and foreign ministry representatives and expressed her appreciation for their efforts. The Israeli Foreign Ministry confirmed that Israeli expert teams will continue providing professional guidance and support to the Venezuelan authorities remotely after the field mission's end. Let me trace the geopolitical lines here because they are genuinely striking. Israel and the United States jointly launched the airstrikes against Iran on February 28 that started this war. The U.S., per the confirmed Reuters reporting, Just Security, July 13th, based on interviews with more than a dozen officials, effectively controls Venezuela's finances, natural resources, and government through the Office of Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Venezuela's acting president, Delcy Rodriguez, is governing under that framework. And Venezuela's acting president just spent 3 weeks hosting an Israeli delegation that came to help rebuild her country's earthquake-damaged infrastructure, approved their reconstruction plan, and thanked them publicly. Iran is watching all three of these governments simultaneously. The country currently being bombed by both Israel and the United States is watching the country that is under the effective control of the same Secretary of State who is managing the war against Iran receive 3 weeks of Israeli earthquake relief, approve an Israeli reconstruction plan, and thank the IDF for its help. The alliance structure is visible and not subtle. What I want to flag is not that there is anything improper about earthquake relief. There isn't. Israel providing humanitarian assistance to earthquake victims is a straightforward good. The detail worth noting is the specific context in which it's occurring. Rodriguez is governing Venezuela under de facto U.S. control. Her government's relationship with the U.S. and Israel is now visibly collaborative. Shared reconstruction planning, IDF officers working alongside Venezuelan authorities. Iran's regional partners include Venezuela's previous government, Maduro's Bolivarian project, and the Hezbollah-linked networks in Latin America that the Trump administration captured Maduro specifically to target. A Venezuelan acting president thanking the IDF for 3 weeks of earthquake help is not a neutral geopolitical signal to Tehran. It is a statement about which side of the new regional alignment Venezuela's transitional government sits on. The Israeli teams will continue advising Venezuela remotely. The reconstruction plan they jointly developed will continue serving as the framework. The technical relationship between the IDF and Venezuela's government, initiated around an earthquake, will persist. All of this is happening while the same IDF is fighting Iran alongside the United States. And while the U.S. Secretary of State who controls Venezuela's government is managing that fight. 3 stories today. On a Sunday when the bombs are not falling and the silence is doing its own kind of work. The bombing pause reveals a munitions ceiling that Caine flagged explicitly, a diplomatic opening that may or may not survive Tuesday's Netanyahu visit to the White House, and an Iranian death toll of 59 civilians and 666 injured since late June that the pause's diplomatic framing has not yet fully reckoned with. France and Spain are fighting monster-scale wildfires today, the third major European climate emergency since May, with more heat on the way, into the same infrastructure that was not built for the temperatures it's now absorbing. And Venezuela's acting president, whose government is under de facto U.S. control, spent 3 weeks hosting an Israeli earthquake relief delegation, approved their reconstruction plan, and thanked the IDF for its help. In a geopolitical triangle that Iran is watching from exactly the angle you'd expect it to. The pause is not peace, the wildfires are not an anomaly, and the Israeli-Venezuelan reconstruction partnership is not unrelated to the war being fought 7,000 miles away. Today is the clearest possible demonstration that the major stories of this moment are not actually separate stories. They're all part of the same account of who's aligned with whom, what resources are running short, and what the ground looks like after 5 months of simultaneous geopolitical crises.